Hello to chocolate lovers of all flavors, no matter where you might be tuning in from today. My name is Clay Gordon, and today's episode of the Chocolate Life Live, we're going to be talking about constructing transparent transparency reports. We'll be right back after the intro. It's here somewhere. I know it is. Hello and welcome everyone to this edition of the Chocolate Life Live. Now, today I'm doing something unusual. So in the last live stream, which was on Friday, I had the entire session was devoted to deconstructing transparency reports. And what I want to say is thank you to everyone. It is the most commented on live stream. I believe it had the most views when I aggregate them across all platforms. So this is obviously a topic that I think people are really very, very interested in. And so I wanted to follow it up today with what I think of as a natural follow-on, which is I don't believe that it's enough to be to take a negative position or to criticize other people or anything like that, unless what you do is you have a positive case to make for saying, well, if I'm, for example, if I'm against nuclear power, what am I going to do to replace it? You just can't be against something. You have to be for an alternative. And so that is the reason why I scheduled today's live stream. So it's about constructing transparency reports. And I've put together what I think of as a couple of guidelines. And these guidelines are based on my analysis of that. And so right now, what I'm doing is I'm sharing my screen. You can see that this is TheChocolateLife.com live. This is what the website looks like right now. And what I want to do is I want to point out that I have, for every single one of my live streams, I put together a post. And so for today's live stream, there is a post on the Chocolate Life, and it includes links to previous live streams where they are in fact relevant. There's also some resources that you can point to. So I talk about something called information design. I talked about it last week. I'll talk about it again a little bit today. Unfortunately, for some reason, the images do not come through on these links. But these are links to what I think of are some really important resources that you can go buy and you can go take a look at if you're interested in the idea of information design, not just graphic design, which is how do I make sure that what it is that I'm presenting it in a way that is both clear, accurate, and not misleading. And so I think, certainly I would recommend them. Also, there was a post on a LinkedIn from Philip Kaufman, who is the founder of Original Beans. There's some back and forth with, Tony's Chocolate Only. I haven't put that link here. Now that I've mentioned it, I probably should put that link here. But it occurs to me that Original Beans is another set of reports that we might want to look into at some point. And then I also ran across, just this morning, as a matter of fact, this FAO, so the Agricultural Organization, did an analysis of the value chain of Europe chocolate, which is sold in the EU, from cocoa, which is coming in from West Africa. And it's really quite fascinating. And so if you're interested in the idea of statistics that you can use, numbers that you can use, in your reporting or your communications with your customers, then this is a really fascinating report. And although it is just the executive summary and it is an advanced copy, and it's also 2 years old, it occurs to me that what I should do is I should go look at the full report and at least link to it from here. And that's something that I will do over the course of the next several days. I would also, like you to know that if you are watching today, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the chat or the comments, and you can ask a question or you can make a comment on what it is that's going on. And I really do appreciate people who are engaged in that way, and I encourage that kind of engagement. While I may know a lot, I don't know everything, and I'm certainly not perfect, as I will go into in today's live stream. And also, as you can see on the screen above you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Grow the channel and let your friends know that friends, colleagues know that this information is available. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly, I would like to focus on the camera as much as I can, but I have a presentation that I have put together. And this presentation is not yet on The Chocolate Life, but it will be after this presentation. I didn't want people to have their attention split between what it is that I had to say and do this, but it will be available for download on The Chocolate Life this afternoon. So this today, right, the topic is constructing transparency reports. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about this image. So this image, I use a service called Unsplash. Lots of images that are there. It is a place where I go when I know that when I have not personally taken an image that I think is relevant to what the day's topic is. And what I did here is I took the basic image, which had the transparent hands overlay in front of it, and then added other layers which obscured the image behind it, but also added sparkly bits. The image for today, also taken from Unsplash, for me was about the idea of transparency, which is we have here a set of, these are probably plexiglass rods, in a square cross-section, which for the most part are clear. But when you take a bunch of things which might be clear or translucent on one side, I think some of these are sandblasted, then what you do is you get a lot of internal reflections, and very, very quickly you have things which on their surface appear to be transparent, but in the end are not in fact transparent. And so that was the reason why I put together these images to talk about this notion of transparency. Now, before we begin anything, I want to issue a set of corrections and apologies. And this is specifically to Greg D'Alessandra at Dandelion. So Greg, if you're watching today, or if somebody's watching today and can point this out to Greg, please, please, please let me know that what I did when I presented last Friday was I clicked on links on the Dandelion website and opened up the two transparency reports, one from 2017, 18, and one from 2019, 20 in Safari, right? Because I was using Safari to present a bunch of different web pages. So I didn't open them up in PDF, I opened them up in Safari. And what happened was that the pages for the 2019-2020 report, which you can see on the right here, were not displayed properly. Right. And so I made some unwarranted assumptions about what the report did and did not contain. And I said some things which were completely and totally wrong. I admit that they were completely and totally wrong because, okay, I misunderstood what was going on with the reports. And it wasn't the fault of the report. It was the fault of the way Safari displayed the report. And so, yeah. No, again, I apologize. I said that it was surprising to me that there was information missing. That information is not missing, right? It's in the report, right? And so I just want to say that, again, I recognize that it was my mistake. I also want to say that what I will do is after this live stream, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and I'm going to, again, issue this apology for people who are going to be watching this live stream in the future. And I'm going to go to TheChocolateLife.com, and in the post for last week's live stream, I am going to issue that apology. And before the end of today, I'm going to send an email off to Greg, letting him know that my mistake, my bad. And I hope that he will accept my apology for that misunderstanding. So, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to jump into the presentation. You'll notice that I've got the slides on the left-hand side that way, so I can know where it is that I am and sort of navigate easily. And what I want to do is I want to introduce right away what I think of as my zeroth principle, right? For those of you who may be an Isaac Asimov fan, specifically the 3 Laws of Robotics and the extended Foundation series, not just the original trilogy, they'll recognize the idea of the zeroth law of robotics. And so the zeroth principle when it comes to constructing a transparency report is don't assume that just because the report renders properly on your screen, right, that it will render properly under all possible viewing circumstances. So this is something we know from internet development generally. We have different web browsers. They adhere to different, their rendering engines are different. And so they will render the same CSS code and they will render it differently. And so what you need to do is you actually need to go in and test, right? Does your web page render properly under all these different browsers, under all these different operating systems? It's a combinatorial problem. It quickly gets really quick, overwhelming, right? But it is not an assumption that you can make that is valid, right? And so doing some testing to ensure that your report is in fact viewed properly is a bit of testing that I would do. Just don't assume that people are going to open your PDF in Preview or the Microsoft Windows equivalent of Preview or Acrobat Reader or something like that. What happens when they open it up in a web browser? Will the web browser display it properly? And so that is my zeroth principle, and that is based upon the fact that I made a mistake in assuming something, and again, for which I apologize. And that's the last. I think I'm going to mention that for most of the rest of today's presentation. I want to say hello to Sebastian, who thanks. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're calling in from or where you're watching this from. So Sebastian is from Germany. Thank you very much for your opinion that I've got a nice channel. It is extremely informative, humane, and holistic in terms of the way you deal with topics. So, right, hats off. I assume that was chapeau means. Sebastian, thank you very much. I do my best to be open-minded and even-handed, and right to admit when I've made a mistake. Also say good morning to Chef Jeffrey Gardner, who's connecting from probably Manhattan Beach and Los Angeles, California. Chef, thanks for saying hello today. So after we get past this zeroth principle, what I want to talk about is what is the purpose of reports? And so I believe, right, or I contend, that the primary purpose of reports is to provide visibility and clarity into sources and processes, right? That's job number one. What we want to do is we want to present information, right, that shines light into how we conduct business, right? The next thing we want to do is we want to tell stories, right? So it turns out that the stories are in service to the information that we are presenting. It's not the information is in service to the stories we want to present. It's really important to understand what the foundation of this is, right? So we want to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, who's doing it, how it gets done, where it gets done, when it gets done. And all of this is in service to building trust and confidence, right? We as consumers, right? We as members of the chocolate community, I as a member of the press, want to have confidence, right, in the trust that I have in the story that you're telling, right, is based upon a solid foundation. And that is, I believe, the fundamental reason for these reports, whether you call it an annual report, a fair report, a sourcing report, a transparency report. All of this is in service to building confidence and trust. Right. And in that regard, I think that there are 3 basic components, right? The primary component, which I think is the foundation, right, is these reports should contain data, right, about the path the cocoa takes from the farm to the factory. So we want to know the details. How does the cocoa get from where it originates to your factory? And we want to know in enough detail to understand, am I directly trading? Am I buying directly from the farmer? If there are intermediaries involved, how many intermediaries are there? Just, we want to know that stuff, right? We also want to know information about each one of the actors, whether they're farmers or cooperatives or middlemen, each one of the actors or entities, the companies, the people who are involved as the cocoa makes its way from the farm to the factory. So this I would think of as metadata, right? We want to know information about the farmers. We want to know information about the cocoa. Some of that information could be how it's fermented. Some of it could be genetics. Some could be the location of the farm. But we basically have data about the supply chain and metadata about what travels through the supply chain, right? And these are the two foundations, right? We need to make sure that these things are true and accurate and complete, right? So we want to make sure about the veracity of the data, right? Before we use something like blockchain, right, to preserve the quote unquote integrity of the data, right? Blockchain is just a technology. It can preserve the integrity of bad data just as easily as it can preserve the integrity of good data. So blockchain may be part of an answer to a solution, but blockchain in and of itself does not say anything about the veracity of the data that gets entered into the system. So just that. And then finally, these first two layers, right, about how the cocoa gets from point A to point B, the farm to the factory, right, all the information about who handles it and what it is that they're handling, which could include transactions and prices, right? And then what we do is we construct a narrative on top of these two foundations. So again, the foundation, right, serves to construct the narrative, right? Not the narrative is used to manipulate the data in the foundation. Really, really important. And again, as I mentioned last Friday, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, right? These are just observations, right? Some of them could be misunderstanding. People are not information designers. People may have different objectives to the objectives that I have in putting these together. So I'm not saying that people are deliberately misrepresenting anything. I'm not saying that people are deliberately lying. We may just have different objectives for what we're doing, and this is sort of my ideal, right? So having gone that before I jump into principles, Lynn, right? You're in Las Palmas and Gran Canarias. I am totally jealous. Haven't been to the Canary Islands, want to go. And so if you're out there, by the pool, enjoying something with a tropical drink, hopefully, I'd be great. So, you found this a really interesting topic. And I'm sorry to hear that you're not well enough to comment. So hopefully, as you say, the Spanish sun will sort that out for you. So let's go into first principles. So the first principle is, right, number one, don't publish dead documents, right? PDFs, web pages can contain links. They contain links to other places within the document, as well as links to external resources, right? So, for example, I don't think I got a copy here. In the Tony's Chocolate most recent report, they'll say something like see page 54. This is PDF. You can link to page 54 and come back, right? Don't make people search for things. I mean, the Tony's report's 130 some odd pages long, right? Asking people to jump to a page and then come back to a page. And if they go to no work, this is 2022, right? The interwebs, right? So HTML, Mosaic, right? And the internet have been a thing for 30 years now, right? And links has always been a part of it. Use the links, right? And a lot of companies involved in chocolate right now, executives come from the tech industry. You know this, right? And so there is no excuse, in my opinion, for publishing flat documents that are dead, that have no links to outside resources, right? So principle number one is, right, if you refer to another page in the document, link to it, right? And if you refer to something which is outside the document, right, I'm reading these things on my computer, chances are I have a live internet connection. Take advantage of that. You don't need to over-explain things in the document when you have all these resources for people who are interested in following that data, because not everyone is. So, which leads into principle number two, or principle 1A, first principle, right, B, which is don't assume that people are going to read closely, right? They're not. Or in fact, assume that they will not read closely, right? So only a small percentage of your closest fans, only a small, your investors, only a small percentage of people who are watchers of the industry will in fact read closely. And even if they do read closely, there's no guarantee that they will in fact interpret things fully correctly. Right, first principle number B is don't assume that people will read the report. And I suppose one of the most egregious examples of this is the one with the recent 2022 chocolate scorecard. There is a methodology which explains how they get to things, right? That methodology is on their website. There is no link to that methodology that I was able to find on the PDF of the report that they published. So there's no way for me in context to be able to understand how the results were generated, right? That's a missed opportunity, right? I read closely, right? I couldn't find it. Don't assume that people are going to read closely, because you know what? Most of them don't have the time. It's TLDR, too long, didn't read, right? They're looking for highlights. They're looking for little tidbits they can use, right? They're not going to read closely. So, right, the third one is consider who your audience is, right? And consider what they want to know, and write to your audience based on what you think they want to know, right? Don't just tell them the story that you want to present, right? Because you can have 1,000 words of narrative around 20 numbers, and you can spin those numbers to be anything you want. So for example, right, I would contend, based on 20 some odd years of experience, that when most people are asking about the price that you paid for cocoa, they want to know the price you paid to the farmer. In reality, they don't care about what you paid FOB, right, which would be at the port of export. They don't care what the landed price is, port of import, the delivered price, which is at your factory door. They really don't care, right? What they want to know is how much you paid to the farmer, and how is that different from other prices. So one of those prices could be the farm gate price in the producing country. It could be compared to the market price. And if you're talking about a market price, is it New York, right, futures? Is it the ICE? Is it London? Be very, very specific about what you're talking about when you're talking about prices. But, right, I would contend that the only price you publish is the FOB price. Then that may be the price that you paid, but is not all of the information that you have in your possession. So for example, right, this is one place where I will go back to the Dandelion report, right? And they do actually say, we got it from Uncommon Cacao, right? And so it's trivial to go to Uncommon because they publish this data in their transparency report to go, how much did you pay at the farm gate, right? They can do this, right? And so it's a lot of work to expect that someone will write to the average reader who may be a fan of your brand to go and do that work for themselves. So think about what it is that your customer wants to know, what the reader wants to know, and give them that information first, right? So after that, we want to go to the next principle, which is prioritize. So we're still at first principles. These are the things I think are, the things you need to consider first, which is prioritize the presentation of the data, putting the factual data ahead of, okay, and before any of the narrative, right? And so this is where I'm going to start looking at a couple of examples. So first of all, this appears to be the front cover of the most recent Tony's Chocolonely annual report, or fair, as they call them, fair reports, I believe. And what they're doing is they're expecting that that this is the design style of Tony's Chocolonely. In one way, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is brilliant, right? So I remember a long time ago, the back page of the Sunday New York Times Magazine, for those of you, this would have been probably in the 70s. I mean, a very, very famous whiskey brand posted just a picture of a photographic backdrop, right? And with alliance, like, it's hard to keep a bottle of this brand around the studio long enough to take a picture of it. And so what they did is they just relied on a name, and people would go, oh gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Here, Tony's is just assuming you know exactly, right, who there is just by looking at this. They don't even have to mention the name of the company, and they don't on the homepage. They're just expecting you to know it. I mean, bold, and at one level, really, really brilliant. And these guys are really good at the level of marketing that they do. So, I am, at one level sort of appalled, right, that they assume that everybody knows who they are. And then I'm sort of impressed that they assume that everybody knows who they are just by taking a look at the graphic design, right? But interesting here, they say preface on page 6, important appendices are on a page 190. So what they're saying is, man, and that's not a link in the document. So you have to get to the document and scroll through down to page 190, right? Before you can get to this important appendices, right? So, right, great, which are none of the chapters which is listed on the homepage, so, or on the cover of the report. So, already I got some challenges. But here is one of the first inside spreads. In fact, I think these are the next 2 pages in the PDF, right? You have to do a lot of work in order to be able to decode this visually. I mean, you could have taken all of these numbers and presented them in a very, very straightforward fashion, right? So that they would have been completely graspable and understandable. And they're also mixing numbers with processes in a way that, again, makes it really, really difficult to decode what it is that's going on, right? And we have over here, right, a graphic, and we don't have any of the numbers behind the graphic. We're just sort of supposed to get a general impression, but man, it's a real challenge to understand what the underlying numbers are behind this, right? So some important kinds of things: 12,574 metric tons of cocoa. That's what they produced. They have 8,921 farmers. These are actually farm families, and there's an average of 6 to 8 people in each family, at least according to the 218 report. They work with 7 cooperatives, so you can get an idea about how many farmers per cooperative, about how much cocoa per cooperative, right? So you can do some analysis of what's going on, but you don't actually, and you can say, oh, they paid 3.79 million in premiums on 12,574 metric tons. So you can figure out on average how much premium they pay per metric ton, but nowhere here do they tell you how much they actually paid for their cocoa, right? And if you want to find out that number, you need to go to a bunch of different places in the document in order to be able to figure out what that is. And as most of the pages in the entire report are this busy, right? I mean, this bright, this colorful, this just lots of different typeface and lots of different sizes, and it's just way too much work to figure it out. I personally think this is a deliberate decision. Got 190 pages. They think they're being open and transparent, but in reality, 99% of the world is not going to go look at this very, very closely. And those of us who are going to read it are going to have trouble figuring out, right, how to go and extract the 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15 pieces of information out of those pages that we're actually looking for. So think about that, right? So second principle, right, is don't assume that your reader has any special industry knowledge, any sort of industry knowledge. So if you use a term like dry weight equivalent, right, or you use an acronym like FCCI, right? So, we would know that the dry weight equivalent refers to roughly 40% of the weight of, so if I have 100 kilos of wet mass, that will dry down to about 40 kilos. So that's what the dry mass equivalent is. And so when we're talking about paying for cocoa, and we're buying it wet, we could actually pay for the wet price, or we could pay for the dry mass equivalent, right? But again, if I'm not in the chocolate industry or I'm not in the cocoa industry, this is not necessarily something I would know it, right? You should have a glossary somewhere in the document. You should link to that glossary, or if you don't have a glossary and it's on your website, link to the page on the website where you talk about that. Don't assume your reader has any special knowledge about anything in the industry. Let them know. This is a chance to inform them. And this is digital. I mean, there is no print cost associated with it. There's no incremental cost for making this a 1-page longer report or linking to a document that exists somewhere else. So explain what you're talking about. Don't just use FCCI. Don't assume that your reader knows who the FCCI are. Use Find Cocoa and Chocolate Initiative. Just why not, right? It's a design issue. You don't have enough room. I'm not buying it. It is less than optimal. Just leave it there. I mean, you want to be able to explain what it is that you're doing in a way that lets people without any special knowledge know what it is that you're referring to when you refer to something, right? So the other one, again, this is important. Hire an information designer, not just a graphic designer, right? So there's an old saw, there are lies, damn lies in statistics. I would propose, and I have proposed, that there are lies, damn lies in infographics. Right? I can construct a drawing that, while having the actual data, right, correct, right, does not represent that data accurately. And so you need to be very, very careful about the way you construct your images, right, in order to be able to make sure that you are in fact conveying what you want to convey. And that includes the overall design and layout of the pages, right, is that what you put on the page, how you put it on the page, the order you put it on the page, the units, all of these things will influence people's perceptions of what's going on. It is possible to deliberately mislead people, and it is also possible to accidentally mislead people. Again, I'm not alleging intent or anything like that to anyone. You just need to be very, very careful. And information design is not usually or not often something. I mean, certainly it is not something that was taught to many designers that I know, right, to think about this. And that's one of the reasons why on The Chocolate Life, there is this set of information design resources, especially this first one, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information by Edward Tufte. It's a book that I probably read for the first time early 1980s, right, when I think it was first published. And it's really, really quite remarkable in terms of providing a general introduction. If you could only buy one information design book, this would be it. There's another author, Richard Saul Wurman. He wrote a book called Information Anxiety. Ricky is probably better known as being one of the two founders of the TED Talks. I got a chance to speak with Ricky about the book Information Anxiety. I actually attended TED 2 back in Monterey, late 1980s, I think. These are important bits of background that if you're going to present a report about what it is you're doing, understand how the graphics that you're using are going to affect the interpretation of the data. Lynn, you may not be feeling well and you're listening in from Grand Canaries. So as well as price, I want to know what they actually do to create equal partnerships with the cocoa farmers, similar to what funders expect in community development projects. So I want to see evidence with the participation of the farmers themselves and how this was done, also what can be better, and what the plans are to address those things. I don't disagree here. But in fact, I think this is where independent reporting plays a role. And if I were, as a journalist, and I am in my role as a journalist working with these companies, I would say what you want to do is you want to have somebody outside your company, right, write about these things, not you yourself. You want to have somebody, me, I don't care who it is, but although I am extremely interested in these things, you want someone who can go in there and talk about what it is that you're doing from an independent perspective, and is not necessarily going to try to not overlook, but soft pedal things which are not successful, right, and things like, whether objectives have been reached in a particular time or not. That's the point. So yes, Lynn, I agree that it should be done. I think this is where outside journalists can lift their weight. And say hello to Juliana from Brazil. Thanks. I wanted to go here, Juliana from Brazil, as I was clicking on it. Lynn, yeah, thank you very much. Just so people, I use people. Excuse me. Those of you who are watching today, many of whom are passionately interested in this topic, which is why you're here. This is something that I've been giving a great deal of thought to, not just for the last 2 years, not just during the pandemic, although I have been doing a great deal of that during the pandemic. But these are things that I've been thinking about since my first trip to origin back in a producing country back in 2003. So yeah, because, right, and here's the point, is that I have deliberately chosen to be an independent observer. So I am not involved in growing cocoa. I'm not involved in transporting cocoa from the farm to the factory. I don't have a brand manufacturing chocolate. I don't have, I don't have any vested interest in any of those things, right? So I am looking at this as an independent observer for all of these things. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a little different from what it is that I'm doing from what a bunch of other people are doing. So fourth principle, be consistent, right? And it's hard to know. So don't change measurement systems. If you're using kilograms in one part of the same page, don't all of a sudden change to metric tons. I mean, although that conversion is really simple, right? For those people who use the metric system, it may not be simple for people who are not used to using the metric system. Don't just assume that people know to divide by 1,000, right, to get from price per metric ton to price per kilo, or to multiply by 1,000 to get from price per kilo to price per metric ton, right? No, most people don't know how to convert acres to hectares, just so. But if you're going to be consistent in using measurements, right, be consistent in using measurements, right? So if you have a piece of information that's on a page in a particular place on one page, don't move it someplace else on another page. Don't make it harder than it needs to be in order to be able to figure things out, right? Now, it may look cool, right? But it makes the pages harder to decode. And what you want to do is you want to make it as easy as possible. No, I think, right, it is my contention that whoever is constructing these reports should make it as easy as possible for people to be able to decode things, right, in a way that is consistent. You want to help their understanding. You want to build trust and confidence, right? So what I do is I'm using the numbers that are presented to help me build trust and confidence. I'm looking to say, is there anything inconsistent in the numbers? I don't go to the narrative first for the touchy-feely, feel-good kind of stuff, right? I will look at the narrative. I will try to see what it is constructed. But keep in mind, right, I know this stuff, right? And so there are some details that could be really, really interesting, but, right, what I want to do is I want to understand what the numbers are telling me, right, in order to be able to figure things out. So, right, so be consistent, right, in terms of the layout of pages, in terms of where information is on those pages, right? If you have a bit of data on one page and it should be that same data on another page, make sure that it's there, right? So I don't have to jump around in order to be able to find it, right? And don't change measurement systems in the middle of talking about something, even if it is relatively simple, like the conversion between kilos and metric tons, right? So fifth principle, when you're comparing things, make sure you're comparing the same thing. So I would contend, for example, that what most people want to know is they want to know the farm gate price in the country where the cocoa is purchased. So while it is interesting to compare the farm gate price with, for example, the fair trade floor price, it is interesting to compare it to the market price, the exchange price. I might choose, the ICCO, this is what the price was on any particular day, right? So, and explain, what that price is. Maybe a discussion of the difference between the futures market and the spot market might be interesting in terms of that. But what you want to do is when you compare something, you're comparing the same things. All right. So if you're saying, okay, I paid, $1.98 at the farm gate for this cocoa, making that number up, but the average price in the rest of the country was $2.07. It doesn't matter if that $1.98 is 20 cents over the market price. It's less than what the average price is in the producing country. So make sure you're comparing the same thing, right? Really, really important to do that. Fifth principle, if you do make comparisons, show the data, show your calculations, and link to your sources. And this is the example that I mentioned early. This is a screenshot from the 2022 chocolate scorecard. Notice there are no numbers here other than a page number, right? Also, the column headers here change from year to year, right? This thing, popular products, changes based on the type of company that it is. So a company like Econ, which is listed on the report, doesn't have popular products, right? So the context of this column can change from page to page to page. If you look at this, we see, oh, overall it's green, but Alter Eco was in the 2021 report, right? They're in the 22 report. Are they in the same position? Interesting to know. So it turns out that there has been position change among the green bunnies on this page, right? But we don't know if that position is positive or negative. Oh, interesting. Wouldn't it be nice to know that, oh, this is, rising with a bullet. This is the first year that they've been included in the scorecard. I would like to know why this is the first year they've been included in the scorecard. The point being is that there is no link on this page or anywhere else in this document to the methodology, right? I need to go find the website, and then I need to go to the page on the website about this document and link to that methodology and read through it. And even if I do read through it, there's a very good chance that I will not find the answers to my questions. So for example, between the 2021 and 22 scorecards, these column headers changed. So in 2021, there was a column, the first column called due diligence, right? And it disappeared, and agrochemical management was not in last year, and all of a sudden it's important. What this does is it makes it impossible to compare 21 and 22 apples to apples because they're reporting about different things. No mention of that, right? You don't know what it is that they're doing here. There's no indication like, this is the 7th year of this report, and this company has been right in this report for 7 years, and it basically hasn't changed its policies. So in terms of the influence of this report on changing a company's business policies, maybe not so much, right? So there's a lot of stuff that we would like to know. I mean, this is a reporting exercise. There's no indication of relationships on this. So for example, Alter Eco, their chocolate was made for them last year by ChocolateLife. I'm guessing that's the same for this year. I don't know. But ChocolateLife last year was on the homepage. On this page in the report this year, they've dropped down to a lower echelon. They're a yellow bunny now rather than a green bunny. And what happened? What changed between 2022 and 2021 to get them dropped? Right? Really, really important that we have no indication of relationships, and it's also really, really important that we have no indication of the relative sizes of the companies. Tony's Chocolate Only, we know from their most recent report, right? Crashed 100 million in sales. Ferrero, one of the top 10 companies in the world, I think. I'd have to go to the candy industry top 100 for 2022 to find out where Ferrero is. But their sales are in the billions. So are we really thinking that it makes sense to compare a company that might have 3, 4, 5 million in sales, or maybe they have 20 million in sales, with 100 million in sales company, right? With a multi-billion-dollar company, and right, Beyond Good is not making its chocolate. Alter Eco is not making its chocolate. Tony's Chocolate Only is not making its chocolate. There's no way that these comparisons hold up under scrutiny. So if you are making comparisons, talk about what it is that you're comparing, letting us know what it is that you're doing. And if you don't have room on the actual document itself, link specifically to where you talk about this someplace else on the web. 6th principle. If you publish a graph, link to the data used to generate the graph. There's a graph here, right? Price per ton. Now, is that a US ton or a metric ton? They're spelling it like a US ton, right? And here's another really, really interesting challenge. Notice over here that they paid 3.9 million euros in premiums, but the price over here is denominated in US dollars, right? Not many people are going to pick that up. And it turns out that the difference between euros and dollars right now, 8, 9, 10%, significant amount, right? You really need to look closely to figure out what this stuff is. And you want to know what the conversion rates are when these numbers were done, right? And if I'm buying in, Central African francs, I need to convert that to some currency, right? These are very, very complex topics. And if I can hide 10%, right, in plain sight, right? By converting, by reporting euros in one place and dollars in another. I mean, who knows what else is being done in other places in the report. All right. So if you do publish a graph, link to the data used to generate the graph in some usable form. I want to be able to download that data in a CSV file, put it in a spreadsheet, and then be able to do my own analysis. The fact that you've got data split across 7, 8, 10, 12 pages, and I need to go figure it, and then I need to go copy it out, and then I need to compare this year versus the previous year, where the data are presented in an entirely different fashion. These are not transparent, and I would argue it's not fair to the reader. Not fair to the reader to put the data together this way. Right. So Mark at Blue Spruce saying, yeah, simplicity is next to godliness. It depends upon what your feelings about God or gods are. Do we really need a 200-page report? 200 plus pages translate to TLDR, quality, not quantity. So here's an interesting point that I might make there, which is, who is the report for? I would say that for the most part, Tony's report is for their investors, right? And it's for people who are involved in the company very, very deeply, right? And so in that respect, they just might need 200 pages in order to be able to discuss what it is that they're doing, because their audience is not the average consumer, what Tony calls Choco fans. I doubt that very few of the people that they refer to, tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, as Choco fans, are actually going to read this report in any detail. But if what you want to do is you want to go and speak to the markets or speak to investors and speak to your employees, right, make them feel real good about what it is you're doing, I think that 200 plus pages is not bad. It's not a bad investment, right, in terms of what you're doing. Right, from my perspective, right, it just makes what it is that I'm trying to do much more difficult than I think it needs to do. This is the 7th principle. So keep all related data on the same page. Don't make me go from one page to another page and back again, especially if the report is any length of time. So don't scatter related data around the report, making it much more difficult to find. And so I have an example. So here's the uncommon table from 2018. Please, the next time you publish this, put in a CSV file and link to it so I can download it. Don't make me copy this out by hand. I mean, right, I did and I will, right? But please, I mean, if people are going to copy this by hand, make it easier for them to be able to get at the data. There's nothing proprietary about this. There's nothing hidden about this. Make it easy, right? Right. You can put in a table and it's real simple. But notice at the bottom, what they do is they have the 2018 average Ghana price, Cote d'Ivoire farm gate price. They have the average commodity export price. And this but number one is there are no links to where this information comes from. So we just have to take it on faith that we know what they're talking about, right? If you do make a reference to a bit of data, link to what your source is so people can go and look at that source and get some context if you don't provide the context in your report, okay? A couple of other things about this. Although this is numbered page 5, it's actually page 7 of this report. And there is a table of contents in the report. And had I looked closely at the table of contents, again, my bad, I would have noticed that there's a table of calculations, which includes some information about what the exchange rates are. And so I would have known that before I started. But hey, right, as I said, don't assume that people are going to read your thing. Don't assume it. Make it easy for them to figure this out. Okay, right. So that's that. But when we go to the next year's report, notice that this stuff across the bottom, apart from the uncommon cacao subsidiary, right, is not there on the page. Now, what they may be relying on is the fact that these numbers are on page 2 of the report, right? So they have a little graph that says what the average prices are, and maybe they're just assuming that you're going to remember what they are. But you know what, man? You've got room in the footer. You did it in 2018. Why you dropped it in 2020 is, it's like I would say, make it easy for the people who are trying to figure out what it is that's is going on in the report. So also interesting about the 2020 report, there don't appear to be page numbers on the pages. Again, this is physically page number 3 of the report, whereas in 2018 it was on page 7. So kudos to you to put this stuff right up front, right? So people get this data right up front. Yay, right? I can look at the numbers and I don't have to read through dozens of pages of narrative before I get there. But there is no table of contents in the 2020 report. I don't understand that completely, right? And again, as I said, missing are the references across the bottom of the page. So if you are going to, right, put data, right, around, put it all in one place, make it easy for me to find it. Don't scatter it around the report, right? And, you know, if you can't find a way to talk about it specifically, put a link to it, right? So that at least I have the PDF file over here and I can open up a browser tab or a browser window over here. And I can go like this, right? Right. And make it easy for me to make it easy for people who care, right, to go and get at this information, right? So finally, minimize the incorporation of irrelevant data. Okay, so we've talked about what quality is here on the Chocolate Life Live in the past, and percentage of fermentation is not an indicator of quality, right? So to some extent, in my opinion, right, going out of your way to indicate what the percentage of fermentation in cocoa, right, is not relevant to anything. 95% cocoa, 95% fermentation levels doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't tell me anything about what the flavor potential for that cocoa is. Right. So if it was, you know, West African cocoa where I wanted chocolate flavor, that could be interesting. Right. But if what I'm looking for is delicate floral fruital notes from some sort of heirloom cocoa coming from Ecuador, right, it turns out that 85% fermentation tells me that chances are we cooked those notes out. But in any respect, there's a bunch of irrelevant information in these reports. And so if it's irrelevant, right, to the discussion in a meaningful way, it's not meaningful. It doesn't give me extra usable data that makes a difference, right? Then just forget, in my opinion, right? Put it in a supplement, put it in an appendix, put it in a link to it someplace else for those people who are interested in finding it. But the average consumer, person who has no special knowledge of chocolate, doesn't know how percentage of fermentation correlates to, right, flavor or quote unquote quality, right? And so I would think that having it occupy, so I believe, or I contend that giving it front and center placement in a quote unquote transparency report or sourcing report, fair report, whatever you want to call it, right, is just putting a lot more data in there, and it's going to distract from what's going on. And maximize the incorporations of relevant data. So if you are talking about flavor potential of cocoa, like throw in a visual. You could be one of the radial pie charts like I developed for the Cocoa of Excellence. It could be a spider graph, which is a more common way of doing it. But if you do have a way of talking about quality especially, right, that's what you want to be focusing on in a meaningful and relevant way. So maximize the incorporation of relevant data, minimize the incorporation of irrelevant data, right? So finally, right, ninth principle, not finally, there is a 10th, and we're getting to the end of the hour. So avoid jargon and overloaded terminology without explaining what it is that you mean when you use those terms. So for example, I have a definition of sustainability that I have published, right? So when I use the word sustainability, what I mean is from an environmental sustainability perspective, that the trees, the cocoa trees, and they're supporting an independent and dependent ecosystems, right, will be healthy and thriving 100 years from now. When I'm talking about economic sustainability, what I mean is that there's enough money left in the system at the farm level. So what the farmer can do is make sure that they can implement the environmental, right, sustainability aspects of the project. When we talk about social sustainability, right, farmers live in communities, and these communities need to be healthy and thriving 100 years from now, right? I also think we need to add things. These things focus in the country of origin, right? In the producing countries, we need to add things which are external to the producing country. We need market sustainability, which means we need people who are willing to pay the price, right? If we don't have people who are willing to pay the price for the environmental, social, and economic sustainability goals, what's the point, right? For example. And then I would throw into sustainability a fifth factor, which has to do with resilience, which is there's more than one way to do things. And so we need to encourage experimentation. We need to make sure that we're not going from serially from plan A to plan B to plan C, that we've got plan A, B, C, D, and all the way through, double Z running simultaneously. And what we can do is, hopefully, is we have some mechanisms for sharing best practices, and people can use the practices that they think are most appropriate to the situation that they are. But building resilience into the system, and not just resilience against disease, but building resilience into the system, I think, is an important aspect of sustainability that most people don't talk about. That's what I mean when I use the word sustainable, right? It has to do with this 100-year view, not the way most companies are thinking about using the word sustainability, right? Oh, we implement 4 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so that's our commitment to sustainability. Well, why only those 4 of the 17? Right? Anyway, whatever it is, be clear about what it is that you're doing, right? If you're using the word traceable, what does the word traceable mean in your context? How do you use the word traceable? If you're using the word sustainable, what does that mean? How are you using it? If you're using a word like ethical, what does ethical mean to you? For me, it means no one's taking unfair advantage of anyone, anywhere in the chain, right? Right? It's fairly simple. That's what ethical means. I am not taking unfair advantage of anyone. I'm not leveraging or exploiting my position relative to anybody else in the supply chain. Right? So I think that everyone who is involved in writing these kinds of reports should do the same thing. Last principle for today, timeliness. There's no way it should take 2 years to write one of these reports, right? So 2017, 2018 for Dandelion, published in 2019, 2020, published in 2022. I mean, the idea that, okay, what it is that I've done is I've got X number of shipments and I paid X number of dollars per ton. You should have all that data available when you roll up your end of year. I mean, you should have it by, the December 31st, at the close of business each year. I mean, there's a lot of information that doesn't take a lot of time in order to get into people's hands so that people can understand, figure out how to present it so that people can get a handle on what it is that's going on. 2 years tells me, right, number one, maybe it's not a priority. It may be, all right, I'm inferring things here, and these inferences may be incorrect, and I'm acknowledging that I'm not perfect in all of these things. I can come up with incorrect and incomplete conclusions based on what data are available to me, right? But another thing it tells me is that you're spending a lot of time constructing a narrative, and what it is you're looking at the numbers and you're going, how can I construct a narrative that will put a positive spin on what it is that goes on? So, for example, I might look at the 2017, 18, 19, and 20 purchasing records that a company chooses to publish, and say, okay, are they upping their commitment to a particular producer? Have they dropped a producer? Are they low? Are they still buying and lowering the commitment? Right? Are they focusing their purchasing efforts in one part of the world as opposed to another part of the world? If they're sourcing through another company, we know who they're sourcing through. All of that stuff is useful information for people who are trying to figure out, what does sustainable mean? What does transparent mean? What does ethical mean when you're talking about all these things? Is a company that makes a claim of being ethical, sustainable, and transparent, how are they living up to those claims, right? And again, right, I think that the narrative that Lynn proposed, right, which has to do with partnerships, I don't think there can ever be an equal partnership, Lynn. We can, here, I don't think it's ever possible for a chocolate maker in the United States to have an equal partnership with the farmer, right? That's another issue altogether, right? But it's if we look at Tony's Chocolate Lonely's report, 150 pages of the first 180 pages are about what they're doing, right, in terms of community development and other kinds of things. Some of it at the farm level, a lot of it outside the producing country. So it's useful information. It can be valuable information, but it can be a challenge to go ahead and decode all of that. And that's the 10th principle, right? Get the data out there quickly. If you need to do a revised version of it, you need to add stuff to it, go ahead, revise it, add stuff to it, right? Put it in front of people. So in the tech world, we talk about a type of software development called rapid iterative development, which means you get stuff out there, you get the response from the market, you figure out what you need to do in order to make it more usable and more useful to the market. Put this, engage with people outside your organization who are consumers of this information. To give you an idea, don't spend 2 years. This is the waterfall development approach, where you spend 2 years developing, right, a software spec, and by the time you end up getting to the development of the software spec, the market has changed, and you're developing a product for a market that no longer exists, right? You spend 2 years developing a sustainability report, a sourcing report, transparency report, whatever you want to call it, that it may reflect some market realities that are one-sided. They reflect only your view of the market. They may not reflect, and they may not reflect how a market has changed. Just a thought. Get the data out there. Get the data out there as quickly as you possibly can, right? And let the data speak for itself. You can construct a narrative around it. Don't construct a narrative first and then publish it to be able to direct people's thoughts about how the data should be interpreted. And those are my principles for how to construct a transparency report. If you're watching here, if you're watching live, if you're watching after the fact, you have some other ideas about what should be in a transparency report. Lynn, thank you very much for your contributions there. I will throw that in, right? And keep in mind that these are, in fact, living documents, right? They should be living documents. If you have links, right, you can redirect the links, you can make corrections, you can do all this kind of stuff. These documents should not exist in isolated as carved in stone or in print with no way to change them. That's not the way technology works anymore. We're not releasing these as annual reports on paper, right, and then delivering these to our shareholders. That's not how this works anymore, right? These are documents which exist, which are created in digital formats, which exist on the web, which exist as PDFs, and therefore are in fact things which are living. If there's an update to something, publish an update to something, right? Just do it, right? The other thing is that it's okay to admit mistakes. None of this is perfect, right? I started off today's presentation because, right, of a technical difficulty. The information in a report was not presented in a particular kind of way. I made the mistake because I didn't leave myself the time, for one reason or another, to go and say, oh, what happens when I look at this in a PDF viewer as opposed to in Safari, right? Is there a different way the data gets presented, right? So I made mistakes, right? And it was a mistake in omission, it was a mistake in commission, right? And as I said, I've given you all who've watched this an idea of how I plan to at least address the fact that I made the mistakes, if not completely rectify them. Also, we all have to commit to doing better, right? So I gave myself 2 days to be able to, parts of 2 days, not 2 whole days, to be able to look at the resources that I was going to be using for today's report and go and take a look and make sure that the data that was there I had a fuller picture of it, and I wasn't misrepresenting either deliberately or by omission what it is that I was seeing, right? We all need to strive for clarity. We all need to strive for accuracy, and we all need to strive for completeness. And that's what it is that we should be committing to, in my opinion, in these reports, right? Another thing which I think is interesting, and this is part of a bit of technical discussion I'm having around the notion of traceability software, is around the notion of confidence in the information itself and in our sources of information. So are we in fact looking to sources of information that are reliable? And how do we know that they are in fact reliable? And how do we then communicate our confidence in that information to the people who are using it so that they can trust what it is that we're saying about that information? So really, really interesting way to think about the development of these reports. Can we do an executive summary up front that presents the high level aspects of what it is that we're doing? right? Which I think what it is that Tony's is trying to do here. It's a high-level summary of what they're going to do in the next 190 or 200 pages of the report. However, right, they've done it in a way that makes it really, really difficult to code, and they've done some obfuscation in terms of changing euros to dollars, right? And am I using metric tons? So actually, they use metric ton here and the spelling of US ton here, long ton here. There's a 10% difference. 2,000 kilos is 2,200 pounds, or 1,000 kilos is 2,200 pounds. There's a 10% difference in the difference between 1 metric ton and 1 long ton, and you can hide a lot in that 10% difference, or in the 10% difference in an exchange rate, for example. Simple thing, always put page numbers on your pages so that people can refer back to things in an easy kind of way. All right, just, if you are going to do an internal reference, Tony says, okay, right, they talk about DACH somewhere as a community. So DACH is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. CH is Switzerland, I believe. And they say refer to page 54, right, for what DACH means. It's like, why? Why do I have to? The first time you explain something like that, you spell it out in full. You use the abbreviation you're going to use from then on. Standard kind of stuff for people to do. Just make it easy for what's going on. And at that, I want to say hello to Estelle. So Estelle Tracy, thanks for the encouragement and support. Yeah, we all fumble our ways through. That's how we move forward. I like to think I like to do my homework, and I do my due diligence. And before I go out and make a statement, I like to make sure that I have the data to back it up. And so this thing that happened with respect to the Dandelion report was humbling for me and eye-opening. And so thanks for the encouragement. And it's because I know that people are watching. I know that people have value for what it is that I do. Sebastian made the first comment today. He says he finds these things useful. This is what motivates me to do these and keeps on doing this. And listen, in terms of the next to the last comment, right? Right. I may know a lot. I don't know everything, as much as I want to. I do make mistakes, and I want to be called on them, right? I want to move towards having an accurate understanding of things. I want to know that the way I'm talking about things is clear, maybe not concise, right? Or maybe not as concise as it should be. Sometimes it's, very much a TLDR kind of situation. I do tend to write long. But I'm looking, right, to make sure that if I represent a point, that I am in fact being factually correct, that I am being accurate, that I am being complete, that I do have an understanding that I can get back to. I'm lucky. I've been doing the chocolate thing for 25 years. I've been thinking about this. I've been an observer of technology and a writer about high technology since 1984. So I've been doing it for almost 40 years. And so I have a background and I have a history and experiences which enable me to perhaps connect things and see things in a way that other people may not. But, right, if you think even if you think I'm wrong, right, about something, you have an alternative opinion, another way to be able to look at something, interpret something, by all means, please let me know. You can do it in the chat here on YouTube, Facebook, or on LinkedIn, or better yet, go to TheChocolateLife. You can join. It's free. There is a free level. However, right, if you do feel like you want to support the work that I'm doing here, there are a number of paid levels. I understand that dollars can be difficult to get by in these days of high inflationary pressure. But I certainly do appreciate the show of support that people do give. But there's always a free, since I started this in January of 2008, there's always been a free membership here on The Chocolate Life, and I'm committed to being able to do that. But you do need to be a member if what it is you want to go down to the bottom of the page and add a comment. You do need to be a member to comment on the live stream. And then finally, right? There's a meme on the page, question authority. For me, it's really important to do so is when somebody in a position of authority gives you a piece of information, you should be critical of it. You should be skeptical. You should ask them, what are they trying to tell me? And why are they trying to tell me it? And so this, for me, is a real important aspect of what it is that I do. And with that, it's been the end of another Chocolate Life Live. We've come to the end of another Chocolate Life Live. And I have to remind everybody that, even though this is a really, really serious topic, right? Just remind everybody that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And so until the next time, thanks everybody. Take care.